This is a Geek Leader. Hello, and welcome to episode 174 of Geek Leader Podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and I want to invite you guys to attend the Women in Tech Conference on October 13th, 2020. It will be live streamed on Twitch thanks to COVID. We're going to be doing a lot more of these conferences live, but this one is all about women in tech. And I've done a series in the past where I've had many female leaders in technology come on the show and talk about what it's been like for a woman in tech. And here we get to hear some of the leading women in tech talk about their experiences, talk about different technologies that they're using, and just show us how women across different roles can discuss data science, cloud development, work environments that they've had to deal with, and things that are moving the needle forward and making technology a more inclusive place. So learn, be inspired, connect with other women that are advancing the inclusion of the technology industry. And you can find all of this at geekleader.com/WIT, Women in Tech, geekleader.com/WIT. This is put together by Manning Publications. They're a sponsor and really appreciate them. So again, Women in Tech, you can go to geekleader.com/WIT, and that's October 13th, 2020. Guys, before I get into the interview today, I want to say this is probably one of the more important episodes that I've done on a Geek Leader podcast. We talk about inclusion, race relations, and go deep into what are some of the things that we as tech leaders can do to make a difference. And I hope you guys really enjoy it. I probably need to do a part two on this one, but again, I hope you guys enjoy this important conversation that I had with Bobby Allen. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got Bobby Allen back again. You may remember him. He's the CTO and Chief Evangelist at CloudGenera, based in Charlotte, North Carolina. We talked before about some technical leadership and cloud computing, and today we're going to get a lot deeper than that. We're going to talk all about whatever it takes us. Society has changed a lot since we've talked. COVID has made a big impact. And Bobby, welcome back to the show. Good to see you.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having me back.
So just give everybody just a quick background story of you if they didn't hear the first episode. We've had some growth since then. So.
Mm-hmm. So I'm the CTO of a company called CloudGenera. It's a cloud computing analytics company that's headquartered right here in Charlotte, which I like to call Silicon South. So when I fly all over the country, going to different events, I try to represent for the Southeast, being a place that has lots of talent and lots of innovation right here. So our company is headquartered here in Charlotte. I'm the CTO. I report directly to the CEO. The other cool thing is everybody at CloudGenera has a superhero persona. So our CEO is Iron Man and I'm Captain America. So he leads the company, but I'm kind of the field general in terms of being the face of the company and the person that faces off to customers a lot. So love what we do there, love what we're building. Outside of that, I also serve as stewardship pastor of a multicultural church in South Charlotte called Wellspring Church. And I'm also a husband and a father. Been married 21 years, have a 13-year-old and an 11-year-old. So, y'all pray for me that know the words of prayer in the program, because sometimes my teen and my tween may not make it to their next birthday. So I'm all those things rolled up into one.
I understand that completely. I've got, a 9, 6, and 2. So we're struggling with that as well. I really like the fact that you brought up that you're a pastor, because that's a challenging time right now. I know I'm also in the Charlotte area, and I go to Elevation Church, which is also a multicultural church in that area. And having to shift from, you go to church every Sunday, you wear what you're going to wear, whatever, whether it's dressed nice or you casual. I don't know exactly how everybody's churches go, but you're going to, look nice. You're going to present yourself. You're going to give everybody the big hug when you see them. You're going to shake hands. You're going to be all building this community. And now all that's taken away, and you have to figure out how to do this with technology. And, and I think you're in a unique spot to kind of talk about some of the things that maybe people had to do differently. And, me being a teacher, I'm having to do things differently too at Winthrop University. The class, I've taught this lecture class for, I think now 8 years. And this is the first year where I'm doing it all digitally. And it's like a little bit of a learning experience. Mostly you're using Zoom and stuff like that. But how has it been for you to have to go through that shift?
Pastoring looks a lot differently now, right? Because you can't necessarily just drive by folks' houses and check on them and see them. When you see someone's body language on a Sunday morning or on a Wednesday night or something like that, you can tell sometimes from looking at them that something is off. Now you're trying to pick that up from text messages, from phone calls, from Zoom conversations. You're trying to check up on the people that you haven't seen in virtual service on Sunday. So it is a little bit different. One of the things that really encouraged me though, John, in terms of kind of the segue between technology and ministry, one of the people at our church actually said to me, she said, you know, if there was ever a time when I was glad that one of our pastors is an expert in cloud computing, it's now. Like, you're built for this. And I'm so glad to have an elder and a pastor who knows a lot of this technology stuff with Zoom and cloud computing and all that. So that was a blessing to me. And it's an affirmation that God gives us skills that we pick up in the world that we can use in the kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the things that we've been doing in terms of streaming and recording and editing and reaching out to people online, having a database of folks, it's a lot of the things that I've picked up in the corporate world that we've applied to our folks, right? Having an accurate database, letting people do online giving and all of that. So God has used a lot of that technology I picked up at Intel and Bank of America and CloudGenera to use for churches. And so I've also tried to help some other people. So it is different. I think we probably try to be really intentional, John, with a lot of our singles in particular, right? Because when you live with a spouse or you've got children, you know, the different touch points with the family, someone that can reach out if you're in trouble. But we've really tried to put our arms around our single people because there are people that don't necessarily have someone that they're seeing, right? Some of these folks haven't gotten hugged in 3 months, 6 months, don't have anybody coming to check on them, you know, asking if they need anything. And we've tried to be intentional to say, look, yes, you know, we're husbands and fathers and leaders and all that, but please don't feel like you're bothering us. You matter to us. You're important to us. Please don't feel like you're dealing with this in isolation on your own. So that's how we tried to lean in and make sure we take care of our people.
Yeah. You know, you always hear about people talking about, well, what about the elderly, taking care of them? But I think the singles, that's one of the groups that make it left out. You know, you haven't gotten married yet. Maybe you're not even dating. You moved to a new town and now this happens and you're all alone. And, you know, it's a really challenging time. And I know I've heard some statistics that, you know, suicide rates way up, depression's way up. And, I mean, I assume a lot of that's, you know, directly impacted to, you know, from COVID, and also all the stuff that's going on with our world today, you know, with police brutality, with race relations kind of going off. And we got this crazy election coming up where who knows what's going to happen or how it's going to happen with mail-in votings. And I don't even want to think about the stress that's going to happen after November, but right now we've got all this happening, and you know, people are afraid, you know, and I know you had a whole series about fear. You know, I've been following your Twitter, and that's one of the reasons I reached back out to you and wanted you back on the show, is because you've had a lot of inspirational and positive messages that I think my audience and even me need to hear, you know, to let us realize that we're not alone. We're all in this together. We have a purpose, and you know, and I think, you know, mentioning the single people, and I think that's one of the things that technology leaders can do too, you know, because not everybody goes to church, not everybody has faith, but as a leader, you know, we do have people on our team that are alone, and you know, what can you do to maybe check up on them, make sure they're okay, and what are some things that as a manager or leader we can do for our people?
I think one thing, practically speaking, it's a great question, John. Like, even things like, you know, we're on a Zoom right now, and we can see each other. I think even things like that. So for example, does someone not want to be on camera because they don't have a home office dedicated, right? They're worried about the messy dining room in the back, or they're worried about the child that may run on camera. So yes, you do want to have one-on-ones with your team, but you may need to ask them what works, right? Do we need to do something early in the morning or do something later at night when they're more comfortable being on camera? And sometimes people are just having that kind of day where they just don't want to be on camera. So do you know, can you relax that standard and just talk to them and try to pick up from the voice cues how they're really doing? I think the biggest thing, I think, is we've got to be flexible, right? We've got to sometimes arrange work around what's happening in life, because for so long we were catering life to what was happening at work. And I think the balance has kind of been skewed. The line between work and life has been, you know, grayed or made ambiguous at best. And we've got to cater to, you know, listening to what you hear in that person's voice. Like, they're stressed, they're anxious, they're dealing with, you know, maybe family members and folks outside. You know, one of the things I know on our team, we've got a guy, a colleague of mine, who's a first responder. This is a tough day for him, right? 9/11. So I know that this is not the day where I'm going to try to load him up with a bunch of stuff, because he lost a lot of comrades. He's in the Northeast, great guy, phenomenal heart. You know, he's a firefighter now. He's a former police officer. And I know that he lost loved ones in 9/11. So this is not the day when I'm trying to have him crank out, you know, statements of work and stuff like that, because I know he's grieving today. we got to be sensitive, I think, to what's happening in the news and in this season. Yes, people want to be productive, but we got to give them space to grieve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you talked about there is being intentional about knowing where each person stands, kind of knowing what they're going through today. And, I think I may have mentioned this on our last interview. I struggle sometimes with empathy and understanding where people's perspective are. And I'm trying to really work on that. And that's kind of been my goal for 2020 is to work on empathy. And of course, then COVID hits and, now it becomes even more important. Right. And something kind of more to think about. And, and then we have, the brutal killing of Mr. Floyd. And when that happened, it's like the whole world kind of changed a little bit. Maybe it didn't change. Maybe it just got opened up to my eyes of what was already there, And as we try to have empathy for others, what are some things that maybe I can do to be more intentional to see, who are my former first responders that are on my team, or who are the people that may be struggling right now with something that's going on in the news that I can maybe talk to some more.
I think, so I'm going to start maybe in a different place, John. I think the most important thing in all of this, I think people have to give grace. There are some hard conversations that have been kind of put on the back burner for a long time. And there are a lot of things that are coming out kind of all at once, right? With what's happening in the news, with, people not knowing what's happening with family members. Like a lot of wounds have been kind of brought to the surface, but there are things that have been decades in the making. And so number one, we're not going to solve it all in 2020 when there are things that have been cooking for decades, things that have been brewing, frustration and all that. So we got to have patience. We've got to have grace. And I think that we really have to fight our urge to be defensive. So here's something I've talked to our company about. So I actually asked our CEO to address our company directly in light of a lot of the racial tension that was happening. And again, I respect our CEO because he said, how much time do you need? And I said, I want to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes because I said, I owe that to my coworkers. I don't want you to hear from CNN and Fox News. You have a Black person that works right here with you that, cares about you and loves you guys. I think it benefits you and me that we can have a discussion with each other. And so this is one of the things I said, John. I said that the things that are happening in the world make me just absolutely angry, but it doesn't mean that I'm angry with you. And we got to be able to make that distinction. Yes, I'm mad. Yes, I'm upset. Yes, I'm angry because even when we look at things like Breonna Taylor, right, with the no-knock warrant, it's this long and the people still have not been arrested.
It drives me crazy.
It's tough. So I think the challenge is we got to be gracious, but I think also even when you're someone who's been one of those groups that's been marginalized or has been wrong, you still have to keep going. So here's one of the things that I share with people: the change that might not happen in you is no excuse for the change that did not happen in me. So just because you're not changing doesn't mean that I can just stay where I am and stay stagnant. I may need to deal with the fact that, if you're coming to me, John, as someone who's vulnerable and who's opening up, I can't give you all the baggage that came from the people that came before you who maybe did push me down or pass me over for that promotion. So I've got to be able to express to you maybe some of that frustration, but not attribute all the baggage and the sins and the debt from the past. And that's sometimes what happens is the person that shows up. One pastor said it this way: you don't hurt the ones you love, you hurt the ones that are close to you. So sometimes you're kicking the dog because the dog is there and the dog can't fight back. Or you hurt your spouse because they're there and they're not going to fight back. We've got to make sure that we are being honest, but that we're also not attributing that baggage to someone else. Something else that I said is the frustration. So here's another angle on, I think, some of the racism that happens. It's not just about the people that lose their lives. Yes, we're grieved for that, but there's also racism and bias in terms of leadership. So this is one thing that's really close to my heart. If we look at the top 50 companies in technology right now, John, something that's close to you and I's world, there are 267 executive positions across those companies. I think 5 of those are filled by Black people. And 2 of those just got filled recently. So you essentially had 1% of those top roles. And what happens is, I was sharing with our company, I've got to prepare my craft to be my best, but prepare in my mind that the world may reject my best because of the color of my skin. And when I think about over the past decades, John, grandparents and great-grandparents and folks like that, they had to be excellent knowing that they were never going to get a fair shot. They were being excellent in hopes that their kids and grandkids would pick up on it and that they would benefit from stuff. So one of the other things I've challenged folks on is, Black people may never see the change that they're fighting for, and white people may never need the change they're fighting for.
Mm-hmm.
And so in terms of being an ally, I've got to believe that maybe there's a relationship or a conversation that I'm having. I may not be the one to get the job. I may not be the one to get the position. And you may not need that advocacy because someone is being biased because of the color of my skin, but we've got to work together to work on this. So personal story for this. So I've got a cousin, Officer Jakai Colson. 4 years ago in the DC area in Prince George's County, there was a young man who wanted to commit suicide by cops. So he comes and he's shooting at a police precinct. He's shooting at the front door of a precinct, just opening fire. And his two brothers, John, are recording this on video. They've got their phones out recording their brother shooting at the precinct, and he wants a cop to come out and kill him. My cousin, who was an off-duty narcotics officer undercover, came up to the station that day to bring barbecue to a friend, right? He had cooked out the day before. So he actually neutralizes the guy, shoots him in the leg, they disarm him. And what ends up happening is one of the officers that later came out of the building pulled out a rifle, shoots my cousin through a fence the length of a football field and kills him when he's got a badge in his hand and he's screaming, police, police. This guy worked in the cube next to my cousin. So how do you shoot somebody who you sit next to in a residential neighborhood, no charges, no suspension, guy hasn't even missed a paycheck? This was 2016. And so I'm frustrated when things like that can happen, when, you know, when folks talk about, you know, if people would have complied. I know my cousin complied because he was an officer. He actually had the signal where his hands were up and he was in distress, where he had his gun and his badge in his hand. He still got shot. So my frustration is we have to be careful of saying, okay, if people would have complied or they would have done this or done that. No, we have some systematic challenges in this system that allow things to happen to certain groups of people, and folks are not held accountable, and that's got to be fixed. Now, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that all cops are bad. I would never say that. They're good police officers, but I want to challenge us that we would not say that a police officer can be good if he can turn a blind eye to bad police officers that are right on his same team. Mm-hmm. We've got to raise the standards to say, look, we got to fight for fairness. We've got to fight for equality. And when someone does something wrong, we've got to push accountability. It's got to change.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you 100%. And, you know, growing up, it's kind of one of those things where I was always taught to respect police officers and any first responder, whatever, you know, and when you hear about these terrible stories of, you know, now, is it a bad cop? I don't know. Maybe it's an under-trained cop. Maybe it's somebody that's not prepared for the situation. Maybe it's somebody with some, you know, psychological disorders, or, you know, maybe it's from PTSD from constantly being, you know, afraid for your life every time you go to pull somebody over. I don't know. There's probably a little bit of all of that, right? There's probably some people that are, you know, completely horribly racist, that are cops that are just, you know, that's out there too, 100% sure. But there's also, you know, the idea that I see the protests, and I'm all for peaceful protests. And then I see the you know, what's going to come of that? I don't know. What is coming of that? I haven't seen anything, honestly. But what can I do as, you know, middle-aged white technology leader? What can I do to make the situation better? Because it feels like my hands are tied. It feels like there's nothing I can do, you know, that makes a difference. There's stuff I can do, but it doesn't seem to make a difference.
Yeah, I think, so there are a couple practical things. And again, these are, you know, don't take this as gospel. These are just a couple things that I think about. But change takes a long time, right? When we think about even like back in the day when, you know, people like Dr. King and John Lewis did bus boycotts and things like that and other peaceful protests, some of those things took hundreds of days. And I think because our time frame is so compressed now, we think an angry tweet or an angry rant on social media is advocating change. No, that's just a rant. There were relationships, there were heart changes. People prayed. They prayed for longevity and stamina, right? So I think the first thing I would say is just don't give up, right? We didn't get in this position overnight. We're not going to get out overnight. Two, I would say don't be silent. If you're in a room, for example, John, that I can't be in, and you hear if the jokes and the language and the bias are present, you can say things that I can't because you're there and because you're part of the group that maybe has the authority, right, to do something. So speaking up in those rooms makes a big difference. One other thing that I'll say, and this is again a personal opinion, I don't think it's appropriate for folks to say that things are going to change when Black people wanted to change. Black people wanted stuff to change for a long time.
Oh yeah.
Things are going to change, to be quite honest, John. I think things are going to change when there are white people that are allies that are willing to give up some power and willing to speak truth to power when things have been wrong and say, look, we can't let this go. We might have joked about this behind closed doors. That day is over. We can't do this. Specifically, though, I've even asked some of my coworkers, look, if you're driving by and you see a young Black man that's been stopped by police, like, don't leave. You know, that same ire that we would have if we were if we felt like we were getting bad service at a restaurant, or had a bad product or whatever, pull out the phone and record that, right? Escalate that to the manager. Don't assume that they're going to get home, because here's the reality, John. There isn't as much racism as we think there is. There's actually more. And we got to let that sink in, that it can't be that bad. No, it is that bad. And we've seen just in 2020, how many times it seems like we turn around and there's another story, there's another picture, there's another time where it seems like excessive force was used on one group, but then on another group that didn't happen. So don't leave. I've asked the folks in my company, if you see a young Black man, pretend that that's my son and do your best to make sure that he gets home, right? Because, things can go south very, very quickly, as we've seen. And there are times when, the use of force can be justified. But then also, I think the accountability, John, comes back to, you can't separate what you believe from how you behave. And so if we say that we're about something, if we say that we're about change, we're about fairness, we're about equality, we've got to be willing to sacrifice for that. We've got to be willing to have hard conversations. And we've got to be willing, again, going back to grace and all that I shared a few minutes ago, we're going to have some awkward conversations. And what I think happens is, and this is going to sound really awkward, John, but you're not the problem. You and I are having this conversation right now. The challenge is the people that are the problem are staying in their own kind of cul-de-sac of thought leadership, of bigoted or biased thoughts. But if we do have a chance to come in contact with those folks, I think we got to try to be gracious. We got to try to tell the truth. But I would also say this, and this is, I'll land here. One of the things that is very tough, John, is when there are white brothers and sisters who come with an attitude of, there's no such thing as white supremacy, prove it to me. So I've got to traumatize myself all over again to educate you around what's happening in this country. And when something is important, John, to individuals or to companies, they're willing to invest time, money, and effort to fix it. And what ends up happening is, if the cost that we're willing to pay is so cheap, then I would say that we're not committed, right? When enterprises say that they're going to go about hiring more diverse people, but they have no budget. When they say that they're going to fund more diverse companies, but they give them no money. They just mentor them. They don't actually write a check. So, like, don't do the thing that makes you feel better. Do the thing that actually makes it better, is what I would tell people, right? Just conversations are great, but like, write the check, make the call, do the introduction, speak up for that person that's not in the room. Like, do that particular thing as if you were in their shoes, which is really what empathy is. That's what we've got to be willing to do more.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think having the diversity training is all nice and good, but until you actually fill the roles that you have with diverse people, you're not doing any good. It's just a waste of time to sit there and have someone tell you, oh, you have unconscious bias. Okay, well, what am I going to do about it? I got to do something about it. Well, let me go and interview some people. Let me hire some people. Let me actually make a difference. And
John, there was a conversation that happened on Twitter the other day. I won't mention the names because I don't want to call people out, but there's some very influential folks in cloud computing, white men, some of them that are friends of mine, and they stood up and said, I got very far in my career and I don't even have a degree. And they acknowledged that there's a level of privilege. And there were several women and several Black people commented that I probably couldn't get away with that, right? You got into some very high level rooms, started your own business, got funding, et cetera, didn't have a piece of paper. My quick story about that, John, I mentioned on our last program, my wife and I went to school together. So my wife and I both did computer science undergrad, computer science and engineering at University of Michigan, undergrad UMBC, grad school Michigan. My wife has a master's in computer science and engineering, interned at NASA, Lockheed, and Intel, and got turned down to be a bank teller. I was furious. I'm like, how? So my wife was literally, if you've seen Hidden Figures, she was one of those women. She was rewriting instruction sets for Intel chips back in 2000 and 2001, and she got turned out to be a bank teller. I was furious. And so we have these things that just stand out to us that just seem like glaring inequity. And we're still having these same conversations in 2020. It blows my mind that we've made so much progress, but we still have so far to go.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, when I look at that, it's, you know, being a white male, I never even got turned down for any job that I interviewed for until probably 10 years after college. You know, and it is not any testament to me being a good speaker, a good interviewer. I was actually terrified of every one of them that I went to. And I felt every time I left thinking I did terrible. But, you know, I definitely think, you know, that there are some biases out there and it's terrible. And we need to figure out what we can do to, you know, fix it. And what is something that I can do? Let's say I'm hiring for a position and I'm getting resumes in. What should I, could I do to try to be more fair?
Well, I think it's not just, I appreciate the question, first of all. I think the fact that you're even willing to go there is huge, right? So I think some of it is, you know, quite honestly, if you have Black folks in your network, ask them, right? Because they're going to know other people that are qualified, or maybe people that you're willing to take a chance on. You know, here's someone, for example, you know, I have a soft spot, John, for single parents. And I also have a soft spot for people that are, I've got family members that are widowers. I've got people that are, you know, older, maybe the kids have gone back to school. Those folks have a sweet spot for me because, you know, if you're someone, for example, maybe you were a homemaker, right? You had degrees and all that, and maybe a woman went home to help raise her kids, and then now the kids are in school and she's going back. She just needs someone to give her a shot.
Yeah.
And I think what I would say is, don't necessarily just look at the current capabilities of that individual, but like look at their potential, look at what they bring to the table. Because we know in tech, John, we've all got to be lifetime learners, right? In terms of, you know, is this someone who's willing to take on new things and new challenges? And I think that's part of it. Is this someone who's hungry? Is this someone who can come in here and they're going to do their best to be excellent? Because I think that that's really more important than the current skills on the resume. And so I would say, look at the resume, yes, but have the conversation. Is this a person that wants to add value and that's hungry? And if I give them a shot, I'm going to unlock potential, right? Where they can do all sorts of new things. But again, ask the folks that you already know, because they probably have other folks in their network that they can send your way.
I think that's good advice and you know, that's where most hiring comes from anyway, right? People in your network. So
It is.
One of the things I will challenge my listeners to do is to go out there and grow your network. You know, I know it's hard now with COVID. You can't go to like a meetup somewhere, but there are lots of virtual ones. And, you know, I attended a Charlotte CIO forum just the other day online. And when we were going through that, I thought it would be terrible because I'm not a big fan of these online conferences and stuff, but they had breakout rooms, and I actually had 4 or 5 people chatting with me at the same time. You know, connected a few people on LinkedIn that I hadn't before. I had a phone call afterwards with a person. You know, it's been, you know, I was able to grow my network a little bit there. Grow your network with people that don't look like you. Absolutely. What does that mean? I don't know. Could it be, you know, that their skin color is different? Could it be that they're a different gender? Could it be that they have totally different religious preferences? Maybe they grew up in a different country. Grow your network with those people, because you're going to get something out of it.
Absolutely.
That you might not be able to quantify, but it will change you in some way when you try to understand what their life is like and was like.
And John, I think you hit the nail on the head, whether it's work or whether it's relationships. That's really my key, is relationships. So one of the ways that I try to make a difference is I try to be very involved in my kids' school. So my kids go to private school. There aren't a ton of African Americans that are there. And I want to be that dad that everybody knows. So I help coach basketball, I help coach flag football. They asked me first to go on overnight field trips. And so I'm sleeping in the cabin with these guys as I'm going on these overnight field trips for the school, because I want them to see, I know, John, that I may be the first Black guy they've ever seen up close. I may be the first pastor they've ever seen. I'm the first guy they've ever seen shave their head. And I told the boys, I'm like, you know, you want to touch it? You want to see how I am? Like, I'm a real person. And what I hope happens is, for these young men that are growing up, white, Black, or other, that they see Coach Allen, or they see Braden and Sydney's dad, that they see that this is a regular guy. They don't see those people or that group. They see a person that invested in me, right? That helped me in basketball, helped me in football, helped me in life. And I think that's where we plant a lot of these seeds is, you know, mentoring, giving of ourselves, serving people. Because you have so much more credibility, John, I believe, to course correct somebody when they know you care. And this is, you know, kind of one of my theses for this year, as I think about like what I want to be known for. The older I get, John, the more I believe it's more important to be a good listener than a prolific speaker. You may remember what I said, you will remember how I made you feel. And that's really the key, I think, is are we connecting with people, building relationships? Because if we have a relationship, John, and you need to ask me an awkward question, we've got enough kind of relational currency that you can say it and I can give you grace and we can work it out, right? And what I often tell people is you got to dig your well before you're thirsty.
Yeah.
So in a time like this when things are already tense, unfortunately, those are really tough times to build relationships. We should have tried to have diverse, dinner guests and diverse vacation friends and diverse people that we hang out with anyway. And this is exposing the fact that a lot of us have only hung out with the same type of people. So, you're at a diverse church, I'm at a diverse church. The other part that I'll say about this, Sean, honestly, a lot of this really should have started in church because so many churches are not diverse. And so a lot of the conversations that should start against the background of, okay, look, I come up short, I sin, I'm inadequate, I need God's grace. When you're coming at whether it's a racial or a bias incident from that background, then we should be coming at it from, we've both come up short, right? Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. That framework allows us to have a more open dialogue and not be judgmental or for me to write you off, right? And that's a whole nother conversation we could have another time. I don't want to have cancel culture be something that proliferates right now, because we say one bad thing and we write people off. We don't give room for growth and transformation and change and reflection. I think that part is horrible. People do make mistakes and they grow from them. We got to give people room to do that.
Yeah. And some people don't even know that they made a mistake, right? I'll give you an example. I was speaking at a conference before COVID, pre-COVID conference. And I made a comment and I said, the guys on my team, didn't seem like it means anything. Well, I said the guys on my team, well, half my team's female, but, and I don't really think of guys as being a gender biased term, but apparently it is. And I was just one of the things I was not aware of. And I spoke at a conference, and afterwards somebody came up to me and told me that. And I said, well, I didn't like the fact that you used the word guys a lot. And I was like, you mean like I oversaid it? Like, no, you never referred to females on your team. And I said, oh, she's like, even your pictures, you had pictures with females on there, but you said guys. And that's not cool to me. And I was like, I never realized guys was a gender term. I thought it was just a group of people. Yeah. And, I had to learn that. I wasn't trying to be, biased in any way. I just didn't know. And now that I know, when I'm giving a talk, I don't ever say guys. I say the people on my team. I leave it very generic because I don't want to offend anybody by not knowing a term that I'm using could be offensive.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a similar experience, John, and it's cool when people can kind of pull us aside and correct us, and when we can accept that, right? So part of it is, with all these tense conversations, we have to try to not be defensive, because someone took a risk to give us that feedback, right? They really didn't have a whole lot to gain from saying that. We could have been really critical and blasted them. And I think we've got to just check our ego and say, if they took a risk to give me this feedback, I need to process it because there could be something there. So there was a young lady that's been a friend of mine for a long time and actually just did it again. It's something that I'm working on. I introduced her to someone else that's a potential contact. And she said, I appreciate the contact, but when you call me young lady, when you introduce me to this other person, you're discounting my 25 years of experience. And you're making it that much harder for them to see me as a leader and a senior level individual. And I said, I apologize. That's not what I intended to do. So part of my point, John, is the unconscious bias and the word choice is not something that only white men have to do. I got confronted by that by a Black woman, and I appreciated that. And I said, I've got to think about what I'm saying. But this is what I love, John, that I appreciate. Just like with racism, there's a difference between being racist and being ignorant. Sometimes you really don't know. And I think the whole key is, what do we do now that we've been corrected and given that constructive criticism?
Yeah. How do you grow, right? How do you change?
Exactly.
How do you make a difference? And, and all I got to say is, if you find yourself, being biased in certain ways, don't think that you're just that way. You can grow, you can change, and you can improve. And, I don't know how to make you grow or change, and I don't want to make anybody do anything, but I know if you can recognize in yourself when someone does come up to you and confront you, don't be defensive, be open-minded. And I think you said it right. They took a risk to come tell you.
Absolutely.
And it's difficult for them to do that. It's not like they're bashing you because they hate you. No, they're wanting to see you improve. If they wanted to bash you, they would just go on Twitter and not actually tell you to your face, you know.
Exactly.
The fact that someone did bring it up to you, it means they care about you. And take it that way.
I agree. I would I guess I would encourage all your listeners, John. This is my kind of personal appeal to them. You know, don't end a relationship because of something you see on social media. I would even challenge them, don't end a relationship because of this election. Because there are some complex choices and some complex issues that we're dealing with right now. Don't end a 20-year relationship because you're trying to decide between two, what I think are honestly poor choices on both sides. So I would just challenge people, give grace, take the long view, look at the fact that we're in this together. At best, John, in 2020, all of us are winging it. There's some new curveball that we get thrown every single week that's different. And so like people are under stress, they're anxious, they're fearful. In light of that, we have to not look at one thing that someone said or one thing that someone did, or how did you vote for this issue or that person? Look, it's all complex. And when November's done and COVID is done, we got to pick up the pieces and still live together.
Yep.
That's what I hope people think about in terms of the long view relationships. From a technology perspective, John, and this is a quick segue to that real quick. My thesis for 2020 has been technology is the easy part, data and behavior are the hard parts. When we come back to all of this, the most complex part, but also the most important part of life and technology is the people.
Yeah.
And anytime we forget about that, we're in danger of marginalizing a certain group of the population. If we see people and folks that have worth and have value and have rights and have thoughts and have feelings, that framework helps us treat people like real individuals, right? Not just a statistic or a number.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people are definitely the hard part. At least it has been for me, right? I can pick up tech and learn it really quickly, but learning how to, empathize with someone, talk to them the right way, have a good, solid one-on-one, and build relationships has always been hard for me. And that's one of the reasons why I do this podcast, so I can talk to people like you, build that, dig that well before it's, I need it, right?
Exactly.
And then when something like COVID happens and, all this stuff happens, I can go back to you and, and get some advice and learn and grow. And, so I'm trying, I hope we're all trying, and hopefully 2020 will, look up the second half of the year. I'm not expecting it to, but, you never know. Right. And one of the things that I look at and I try to tell people that are always discouraged about 2020 is, 2020 is always hindsight, right? I'm sure that joke's going to come out all over the place, but it may seem bad because there's a lot of stuff going on, but it's actually, we're still living in probably one of the best times we've been in before. Maybe we're seeing it for what it is for the first time.
Absolutely.
But it's still better than what it was in the 1800s, right? We're not, we have COVID, but guess what? We don't have polio, right? Things may be tough right now, or we may think it's tough because it's worse than it was in January, but guess what? It's better than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and I just have to have faith and believe that it's going to continue to get better and will continue to get better, over time. We're going to go through these hardships. We're going to go through these valleys sometimes to learn, to be grateful for what we've got. And I think gratitude is what's going to bring us out of this.
That's huge. And I think, along with that, John, I believe personally that God has given us things to be thankful for, even in the midst of how tough things are. And we have to make sure that we can see those things. So, today's 9/11, and I want to just share with your whole listening audience, anyone that was impacted by that, deeply sorry for that. The first offender or the first responders, anybody that was involved, because of the violence that happened, because of the sickness that came after that, it was tough. I remember being in Portland when my mother called me. She said, turn on the TV right now. And it looked like something from a movie, right? We're 3 hours behind. A lot of us were still asleep. It was very surreal, but yet my niece turned one year old today, and she just started walking this morning. My sister sent me a video of that. Praise God that, here's this new life, my little niece. God gives us these glimpses of things to be thankful for, John. And so I want your listeners to not feel guilty. Yes, we do want to grieve with those who are grieving, but don't feel guilty when God has given you something to be thankful for, right? Or he's given you someone in your network or in your family to be thankful, right? The Bible says, rejoice with those who rejoice and mourn with those who mourn. You don't owe it to anybody to have to stay miserable for a certain season or to act like you're happy when you're really sad. Like, embrace those authentic feelings, all the things, because the reality is this, John, God trusted us to be alive in 2020 for some reason. There are things that we're dealing with that no one else did, but he saw fit to put us here in this year and in this season. This is going to be our, our grandparents would talk about walking to school in 4 feet of snow. 2020 is that for us, right? That's what us and our kids are going to have. But he trusted us to be able to endure during this time and to come out of it better. So he's going to use it as part of his plan.
Yeah, I actually saw someone post on Facebook that their kid was really disappointed because there'll never be any more snow days now that we've got Zoom.
I didn't think about that. That is true. That is true.
But
wow.
Yeah, so it's always great to talk to you. I feel like I finished these conversations more uplifted, and I feel like I've learned a lot, and I feel like there's faith and hope for humanity going forward. How can people maybe find out more about you? Maybe follow you on Twitter, because you got some great quotes. Your tweets are awesome, and connect with you.
Thank you. So my Twitter handle is @BAllen_CLT. Think of Ballin in Charlotte. Again, trying to represent Silicon South and for the Southeast. And then I archive a lot of the things that I share on my personal website, bobbyjallen.me. So what I do every Monday, I put out a Marriage Monday to try to encourage people to keep fighting for their marriage. Every Wednesday, I put out a Wednesday Wisdom about just life. And every Thursday, I put out a Thursday Thought, usually around technology. So just trying to be very simple, cut to the chase. What are things that I hope are helpful to people? And I want to just encourage people, live your best life and know that God has a plan for everything that you're going through right now.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much. I really appreciate having you on. Again, you're always welcome on. Anytime you have something you want to say, just shoot me a message. We'll get it worked out, because it's always great to talk to you, Bobby.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it.
I hope you guys enjoyed that powerful conversation that we just had. And please share this episode with a friend. And, don't forget, you can make a difference, and hopefully you'll learn something like I did. And also, don't forget that October 13th, 2020 is the Women in Tech Conference sponsored by Manning. You can find out more about that by going to geekleader.com/WIT. And that's the Women in Tech Conference, October 13th, 2020. It will be live streamed on Twitch. Again, at geekleader.com/WIT.